Hey, everybody, welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 203, recorded on May 23rd, 2012. I'm Ryan Schraub.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
And you don't have to worry about going through like the little intricacies of when somebody else hosts a podcast. One of the things I've noticed is when I listen to the other episodes that I am not on, guys, you guys all seem much more timid than when I am on the podcast. Like you all seem like you're afraid to talk or to make jokes or any of that kind of stuff.
It's like a BBC episode.
Seriously. How many penis jokes did I make at Jeremy's expense last time?
Maybe I'm just talking about the intro parts of it. Because you all kind of seem...
Yeah, you watched the beginning
like,
and the end, didn't you?
Right.
You didn't watch the middle.
That's how I watch.
You didn't watch the meat of the broadcast.
Oh, you're being generous tonight, Josh.
Well, I was talking about myself.
See, that's what I'm talking about. That's what we need in our episodes, the excitement and energy of that. Let's get into some hardware news and discussion. PCPer.com/podcast, the URL to share with all your friends, to talk about our show, and then Twitter.com/PCPer, Facebook.com/PCPer, YouTube.com/PCPer.
YouTube.com, yes. And subscribe to that, you people.
Yes, subscribe to that. We do great stuff. It's amazing. You'll just love it. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of quick things here because you guys talked about all the cool stuff last week while I was gone.
The cool kids.
Yeah, that's usually how it happens. And no, I get that. So I wanted to touch on just real quick. I know you guys already gave your kind of thoughts on the process, but all the news that came out kind of during GTC, the biggest of which was GK110. I do want to say that the more I talk to people, I don't know if you guys actually mentioned this specifically in the podcast, but the more I talk to people, the more likely it seems that we will eventually see a consumer version of this GPU. Not for quite a while, like end of the year type time frame, but it seems like we may eventually see something in the consumer space out of GK110. I don't know, Josh, did you theorize that, get one way or the other last week?
You know, I wasn't entirely sure if they would do such a thing, just because it's still a large die. They've had so much success, at least in the press, with their GTX 680 and now 690. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of wondered if they were willing to spend that kind of outlay to have that big of a chip in a consumer graphics when they could use those same, pretty decent chips in a card that is 3 times to 4 times more expensive.
Sure.
Especially when we're talking about wafer costs, eventually 28 nanometers is going to be cheap to produce on, and certainly then might be the time to do it. But then I also kind of wonder about the actual design itself. They got a bunch of the double precision units in there that the GK104 does not have. And how many games do you know that actually uses double precision?
None, right? And you're exactly correct. I really think they'll only really do this if AMD kind of comes out of left field with a better product. Like they come out with, I'm not talking about 7990. I'm not talking about the dual GPU version, but like a single GPU overclocked card, or they have some secret chip that nobody really knew about that can take away the performance crown from 680. Then we might see like a GK110 part. If not, we may not see another chip until like GK114, right? Which will be the kind of smaller version of this, right? Maybe it'll have 12 SMX units or something like that, and they'll be running at a slightly better clock speeds and that kind of stuff. I don't know. There's some interesting stuff there. I know you guys talked about it last week, but the idea of having a 7.1 billion transistor GPU with 2,800 shader processors, just 2,800 of these shader processors, not like the smaller ones that AMD has built, but it's just really impressive. What else was last week? NVIDIA Grid.
What's a 384-bit memory bus? So obviously, I'm assuming that the ROP count also went up with that.
Yeah, it did. And actually, if you think about it, you're going from 8 SMX units to 14 essentially, 15 or 14, right? 15. But you're only, I guess, you're almost doubling your shader count, but you're only increasing your memory interface by 50%. So there's a potential for that to be kind of like a bottleneck in some applications in some instances as well, right? So,
Well, you know what the answer to that is? Large caches.
Large caches. I was going to say faster memory, but that would work too.
Yeah.
6 gigabits per second is pretty fast. The other stuff that came out last week was the NVIDIA Grid. This was kind of like their cloud gaming system. Interesting in theory, still need it to be proven to me that they've somehow increased or decreased latencies and that they've improved gameplay quality dramatically. I think NVIDIA hoped this was going to be a much bigger announcement than it maybe turned out to be. Look, the point is NVIDIA wants to make sure anytime there is a place to utilize a GPU, that their GPU is the one being utilized, right? So whether or not it's a GPU for a cloud gaming system like OnLive or Gaikai, or if it's a GPU in your gaming console or GPU in your PC or your Ultrabook, they want to make sure that theirs is the GPU in there. And Grid is going to help them do that, right? And if they technology can wrap around there that improve the specs of cloud gaming more than they have otherwise, then I'm open to see it, but I need to be shown it rather than just being shown some slides and some network latency graph improvements that I don't quite 100% believe in and stand behind. The other NVIDIA part was the GTX 670. The good news is that card's in stock. You can actually buy that card, so that's a plus. I think the GTX 670 is probably my favorite GPU available now. $399, great performance, overclock almost to the performance levels of a GTX 680, even though you are missing one SMX unit. I think the GTX 670. Do we consider the GTX 570 to have been a very, very popular card? I've always thought that it was not. I thought always that you either went for a 560 or you went to a 580.
I
but
knew
the
quite a few people that went with
overlooked.
570. It was a significant jump over the 560.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it only had 1.2 gigs of memory, it still was plenty fast. I've known quite a few folks who got it because $350 is a lot more palatable than $499 at the time.
Right.
At least for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the 670 card is obviously going to be even more popular because you can buy it. Right, there's people that were maybe looking at a GTX 680 and then suddenly realized that, I've been waiting 2 months now since the GTX 680 was officially launched in March 22nd, I think is when it came out. And you still find like consistent stock on the card at anywhere. I don't think I actually had it in the show notes today, but if you look on the homepage at PCPro.com, you'll see we did another one of those stock update articles. And every 7000 series card, 7970, 7950, 7870, 7850, 7770, and 7750, all in stock, all at their advertised prices, MSRP prices, or $10 less now. And the GTX 600 series, 690, no stock, 680, no stock, 670, I think 2 or 3 of the cards were in stock. And I think the MSI card is actually overclocked and still available at the MSRP price.
And hey, last Friday, Zotac had their super duper GTX 680 up for a grand total of 15 minutes.
15 minutes. It's amazing.
Unbelievable.
Just long enough for me to say, if this lasts for a day, I'll put it on the leaderboard. And 10 minutes later, Ken's like, no, it's gone. That's gone.
We've had people complain in our comment sections. It's like, how can you recommend a part if you can't buy it? And I say, well, we recommend the part in our reviews because we're reviewing that product. And it's always with the caveat of if you can find it at this price, it's worth a good card. Our true kind of like daily recommendations are at the hardware leaderboard. And we still don't have it there, do we, Jeremy?
670's there. 680,
670 is there.
No chance.
Right. And
670's stayed in stock. It's impressive. One model.
There's literally, I just looked for 680s and like the buttons show up as not auto notify on a couple of Asus boards. And then you go to click and actually look at the board and it says not in stock. So it's
look at that. I'm looking at it now. I clicked add to cart and then it says Asus GTX 680 2G5 has been
on the best is I went to
Amazon.
I went to Amazon, checked out the prices, and there are some in stock with the lowest price of $604 for one of these cards. And the average price of cards in stock was $650, and the best was the GTX 690. You could buy one at the low price of $1,490.
Holy crap! Wow. Now here, okay,
Barnum and Bailey said it best, didn't they?
Here, yes. we've got an issue. I just put an Asus DirectCU 2 GTX 680 in my cart for $529. If I buy it, I could probably put it on Amazon for $899, and then we could split that money with everybody who listens to the podcast, because we don't want people to get us off.
So you're going to start selling GTX 680 futures. Yeah, I might have this card on Newegg in a little bit. So as long as you give me this much money up front, I'll make sure that you get it. Yeah.
I like that. So yeah, that's the GTX 670. That's good. And then AMD Trinity came out. And this is kind of an odd release because it's out on the notebook first. They did a big push on the notebook, and we don't have any idea when we're going to get the desktop parts, really. Matt did our review, really, of the Trinity notebook platform. And overall, he was impressed with the performance increase in the CPU architecture over Llano, because Llano was based on the Athlon cores. And though the GPU performance increase wasn't as dramatic as they'd maybe hoped, it was still faster than the HD 4000, but not as fast, not as much faster as maybe we had hoped we would see, right? So interesting stuff there. I'm sure you guys talked about it last week, so go check out the Trinity review. We're going to do more testing with Trinity in the very near future. On the notebook side, we're going to do some kind of more direct comparisons, CPU to CPU comparisons, and try to see if there's maybe some hidden capability in the Trinity architecture that maybe didn't stand out to us at first look. Also,
and is everything copacetic on the Ivy Bridge mobile, or do you think that there could be some interesting issues?
Are you talking about what Matt was talking about today on our gamer discussion? So yes. he was pointing out that we got in our dual core stuff. I don't know if we're allowed to talk about that yet, but that the graphics performance maybe wasn't nearly as close as it was with the quad core performance, even though they're both using HD 4000. I think it has to do with the GPU clock speeds and that kind of stuff. So I sent him on a hunt to use GPU-Z or some other kind of clock monitoring software to keep an eye on the GPU, the processor graphics clock speeds of Ivy Bridge, both on the quad core and the dual core, and see where we're at in terms of if maybe I guess the reference platform that we got from NVIDIA, the Asus N56VM, maybe had a lot more thermal headroom and allowed their GPU, the processor graphics, to clock a lot higher. So we'll see if something was going on with that for sure. So that kind of rounds up last week. This week, Lee posted a review of the Antec High Current Pro Platinum 1,000 watt power supply. Pretty impressive to see a kilowatt power supply with platinum, 80 plus platinum rating to it. Very highly efficient. I think platinum is the highest efficiency rating you can get through the 80 plus program. What is the cost on it though? It's $269.90. So you're going to pay
inexpensive.
Yes. Yeah, so that's a problem with these super high-end power supplies when you get into the platinum level of certification. Is that you're paying quite a bit more for the platinum certification as opposed to like gold. When in reality, like the dollar savings you get going from gold to platinum, like over the lifespan of the power supply over 2 or 3 years, doesn't even come close to that $100 or $120 difference that you would have to pay to get that different power supply there. But if you're looking for a
7-year warranty is nice.
7-year warranty is great. Yeah. And he loved the power supply. The only weakness he had is that it was a very deep unit. It was 199 millimeter, 190 millimeter, 7.5 inches deep. So if you had like a smaller case, you might run into some issue where the cables coming out of the back of it would interfere with other devices. But the reason it has that depth is so it has the room for the components necessary to hit the platinum certification levels.
It's kind of interesting to see that Antec, 5 years ago, their name was garbage. I mean, they started out in the early 2000s with really solid products. They started outsourcing a bunch of stuff. They weren't paying attention. I don't know what the heck the problem was, but I had so many Antec power supplies just burn out and fail on me. it wasn't even funny. And it seems like about 3 to 4 years ago, they started to really, catch on that perhaps they were doing something wrong with all of these RMAs that they were getting. And boy, I'm using one of those High Current Pro 1200s in the graphics testing machine, and it's just a bulletproof power supply. Really neat stuff that they are doing now. So yeah, it's nice to see that a company such as Antec, who had a good reputation, then soiled it, has finally climbed back up and offers some good products. But when you're competing against the Corsairs, kind of the reinvigorated Thermaltake, OCZ with their PC power and cooling. I mean, there's a lot of good products out there, and it's nice to see we have another one who can actually step up.
Matt also posted the full review of the Asus N56 VM, the notebook we were just referring to. Was our Ivy Bridge quad-core reference system. Now he's done a review of the whole system, the whole notebook as a whole, since you will be able to buy the N56 VM. So if you're interested in kind of he calls it the do-it-all Ivy Bridge laptop, and that's mainly because it's kind of your average priced, average screen. It's a 15.5-inch product. It does have a quad-core processor, a 2-year warranty. I'm trying to see where he gives us the price on this.
I don't think he did, because it was a reference, so they didn't really spec it out at that point.
Okay, it's a good system in its whole, but I mean it is a large machine. It has a full number pad and all that kind of stuff on it as well. So check out that review if you are interested in kind of like a full-sized Ivy Bridge notebook before the world of the dual cores comes out. And then we're also going to talk with Josh, I guess, about the XFX Double D's Black Edition.
Geez, now you can see why Ryan gave me this review, because
I thought it was fitting.
It's more than a handful. You can see the Double D's right here. I feel like that owl guy from The Watchmen, sort of.
No, not really.
No, not at all.
I like the pasties on it.
Can you see it better now?
Oh, yeah. Nice.
No. Anyway.
No.
This was my first review of the HD 7800 series cards. XFX sent us two of these monsters. One was the HD 7870, and the other was the 7850. The 7870, I believe, has, 1,280 cores. The 7850 is 1024. I believe. Gosh darn it. All these numbers going around my head. But essentially, that's what you get. These are all based on the latest, of course, 7000 series, the GCN architecture from AMD. These are all slightly overclocked, and they have better cooling, which is something that XFX is trying to do. Now, some years back, if I could reach way back there and get one of the 8800 GTX XXX edition cards, it all had stock coolers. Wasn't anything exciting about it. Well, they're finally kind of catching up with the MSIs and the Asus of the world by improving the cooling, which they have, a larger dual fan type heatsink. And they're improving the types of components that they're putting on here. Now, it's not quite up to the level of, let's say, the MSI R7970 Lightning, which is so over the top in terms of cooling and component choice. It is no wonder it costs $550 and above when you can actually buy the thing. These are a little bit more reasonable when it comes to price. The R7870 comes in at about $389, and the 7850 is about $274. Now these are considered the Double D edition, Double D Black edition, which means it's got the better cooling, and it is overclocked right out of the box. The 7870 is clocked at 1050 megahertz as compared to the stock clock of 1000 megahertz. And the 7850 is actually a little bit more impressive in how they increase the clock right off the bat. A stock clock version is 860 megahertz. They sell theirs at 975 megahertz. So 115 megahertz overclock is, nothing to sneeze at. And these are, good chips. Performance was perhaps one of the more interesting things that we looked at, and probably the only thing you should really consider when you're spending money. But right. The 7850 was very comparable to last generation's HD 6970. So you have a much smaller chip. It runs much cooler. It's a 130 watt TDP chip as compared to a 225 watt HD 6970. It ran a little bit faster. The overclock version ran a little bit faster still, and it started to approach GTX, standard GTX 580 speeds from NVIDIA. Now, the 7870, which I have here, again, it's slightly overclocked, and this was nipping right at the heels and changing blows with a heavily overclocked GTX 580, and the one that I tested against was the MSI N580 GTX Lightning Extreme Edition, which was overclocked. It was extreme, had 3 gigs of memory on there. And when it was released, I believe it was a $650 to $700 card. Now, this card, of course, at $389 is much cheaper, much more efficient, runs cooler, and runs pretty much right up there with that last generation highest end card. So AMD's doing some nice things there. It's got all the features you would expect. It's DX 11.1. It can handle 4 outputs, even though this particular model has 5 outputs in the form of 2 DVIs, an HDMI, and 2 mini DVI, mini display ports. You can only use 4 of them at one time, but still, this is something that is easily able to push 3 monitors. And while performance is not fantastic when you're doing Eyefinity in high, with ultra settings in a lot of the latest games, it can still push a lot of the older games at that, and some of the later ones with medium type settings with no AA. If you were to crossfire these, then they do really, really well. The problem that we have primarily with the 7870 is the GTX 670. And when you consider that you can buy one for $399 and you compare the performance of the 7870 from AMD against that card, it kind of loses badly. I mean, it's night and day. And for only $10 difference. And not only that, but you can look at the HD 7950 if you're more in the AMD camp. That's only about $20 more expensive. Sure, you get an extra gig of memory, but in terms of overall performance, the difference is not that terribly great for what you're paying. So AMD and its partners really need to relook where they're putting these products in terms of prices, and they need to adjust it. Now, on the other hand, the HD 7850 at $274 is really in a class by itself. Its competition is the last generation GTX 570 and the GTX 560 Ti. Both of those cards fall well behind that particular product in terms of performance. And again, you're running a cooler chip. It's a cooler card, and it doesn't pull nearly as much power. It's 130 watt TDP as compared to a GTX 570, which I believe is about 225. The 560 is 175, somewhere around that. So you're having some significant savings in power. You just have slightly better capabilities due to DX 11.1 and some of the video encoding and decoding stuff that this product enables. So that one got the gold award, the 7850 from XFX. It was well built. It was a pretty nice card. I thought the price was very good for what you got in terms of performance and features, but the 7870 version was just way too high priced. Now, AMD and its partners have built quite a bit of margin in these cards, and eventually we are going to see them start dropping down in price as we see more and more GTX 560s, potentially GTX 660s that may or may not be entering the market in the next several months. But the other drawbacks that I thought with the XFX design, and especially when comparing it to like MSI's Twin Frozr 3 and the latest Twin Frozr 4s, the fans aren't usually as effective. I mean, MSI has a propeller type fans that push more air. Bigger still is this is a 4 heat pipe card with a pretty widely spaced aluminum fin array of a heatsink. And when we look at, say, an example of the last generation MSI card, if you were to, kind of put these together and really take a good close look, the MSI card has a lot more aluminum in there. It's more tightly packed. It's got 5 heat pipes in there, 2 of which are the larger 8mm versions. And so these stay a little bit cooler, a little bit more efficient. They're heavier duty than what XFX actually offers. And, hopefully sometime XFX will kind of, change the design a bit. But when you're also kind of talking about the 7870, it's still 170 watt TDP part as compared to 200 plus. And so the cooling requirements aren't nearly as high as some of these last generation cards or what MSI is putting on, say, the R7970 or their more standard Twin Frozr 4 7970 cards. So overall, I was pleased with the cards. The build quality was good. The performance was good. But again, the price on the HD 7870 was just a little too high. And that being said, again, the R7850 was a very good buy because NVIDIA has absolutely nothing at this time to compete against it, only the last generation parts, of which that particular card really kind of takes them out to the woodshed and slaps them around in many, many different ways. So that's the review.
We did have a question in the chat.
Was it one massive run-on sentence? Was it better than Cats? Did you laugh and laugh?
No, I did. But we also had a question in the chat, which was the temperatures that you did. Was that in that dirty old dusty case you've got? Or was that in an open air bench?
No, it was the dirty old case. And, you only see some pieces of dust in there. But, boy, the airflow was really, really good. So...
Well, how else would the dust get in there?
I swapped out the cases for the next series of reviews. So, and that's going to be another review in itself. Enermax sent this absolutely massive case that it's massive. It's large.
It's a massive case.
The Enermax massive.
Massive.
It's a big case, guys. So one of the reasons that you may want to get one of these higher end graphics cards, 7870, GTX 680, whatever it is, Epic revealed screenshots of Unreal Engine 4 that are actually really, really impressive looking. If you go to the post on our site, you'll see the probably the one that I think is the coolest looking is used there. That one. That's pretty badass looking. If you click through to the Wired Magazine or PC Gamer links in that story, you'll see a host of other images that are kind of equally stunning. And I don't know if it was in this story, but one of you guys can jog my memory. Didn't they talk about like the kind of compute power that was required for this engine was just well beyond anything the consoles had today, and that's why people are kind of speculating that the next generation consoles are going to be discussed at least at E3 next month. Anybody remember that?
Was it the Samaritan demo that was the first Unreal 4 engine thing that we saw?
Yep,
that was powered initially by 3 by GTX 580s, and then later on with some optimizations, the GTX 680.
Correct.
Yes.
You would be correct.
And that kind of computational power far exceeds that of current generation consoles.
And probably next.
I don't know why you guys got to get all choked up about it.
It's hard to talk
about. Cat's in the same room, and I have allergies.
Time to get rid of the cats. you know, what this shows you is the reason we kind of post this up there is like, look, guys, there's a reason to buy better generation graphics cards, next generation graphics cards, and companies like Unreal are still really pushing the graphical edge. They're really impressive to see that. What is maybe not impressive to see is that AMD's CEO, I think it was the CEO, Rory Reid, believes that, quote,
and that's not a picture of him.
No, quote, there is, quote, enough
Dirk Meyer might picture him as such, but that's not actually Rory Reid.
I think if that was their CEO, they would do better.
They probably
I think
would.
you're probably right.
I think if the devil is your CEO, you're guaranteed to be successful for at least moderate amounts of time. Rory Reid, who is the CEO of AMD, said that there is, quote, enough processing power on every laptop on the planet today, and that AMD will not chase Intel making needlessly powerful CPUs. Now, this is not really a new statement from them. They kind of made this argument as soon as Rory came into the fold, right? And as soon as he started being there, it's like, look, we're not going to chase Intel down this path of infinitely powerful CPUs. And it's really unencouraging.
So what they're saying is that we're not going to perform and focus on the primary task of a CPU.
That's one way of looking at it. I mean,
how about this? This is genius.
Okay.
Intel and AMD are two triathletes. One is really good at swimming, the other is really good at running. So why should the guy who's really good at swimming, work extra hard to try to keep up and running when they still already have an advantage swimming? Okay, it's kind of a silly analogy, but that's kind of where AMD is standing. I mean, like I mentioned, last week or a couple of weeks ago, we were at a point of pervasively good enough computing in terms of CPU stuff. 95% of our everyday computing will not be affected by these different GPUs or CPUs. Unless you're playing Skyrim and you want 90 frames per second versus 60, then you're going to run into some physics problems and whatnot. But otherwise, your 60 frames per second CPU is going to do, perfectly fine. Though I may shoot myself later for actually saying that. But running Office, running Flash video, running Silverlight, running anything on the internet, your Word, you're recalculating an Excel spreadsheet. About the only thing that you're going to start really hitting some issues with is editing, 4K or 16K style pictures that require a lot of processing power to be able to apply filters, dithering, whatever the hell that Photoshop or any of those other things will do that will eat up the cycles.
I guess my issue with...
Well, and we can also hope that it's forward-looking. Right now, we're on a big race for the bottom, where who can do just enough computation while using almost no electricity whatsoever. We're sort of looking at a big difference where all of a sudden Intel and AMD are both going, who is this ARM fellow and why are they stealing our market share in the server room? So in a way, AMD sort of has to say, look, we're not going to beat Intel. We don't have the R&D. We don't have the budget. We don't have a tenth the budget than Intel does just to toss around buying companies on the off chance that this is going to pan out in the future. So why not turn it around? Why not look for stuff that is just good enough for the consumer market and really, really try and get those few remaining engineers that still work at the company working on low-powered computing so that they can try and hopefully... Maybe not one processor is going to be comparable to an Intel. However, if you slap 8 of them together in something, and I'm trying to remember what the interconnect technology that they'd recently bought was, but if you, thank you. So if you sit that all together, now all of a sudden for the same cost, maybe half of the power consumption of a comparable Intel chip, AMD is going to do the same job.
Yeah, I guess. Look,
they've got to change something.
There's definitely two ways to go about it. You go the performance route, you go the power efficiency route. My issue is if we're never going to see innovation in the software world. We're never going to see innovation in the PC world for everyday consumers unless there's processing power available for developers to take advantage of. Take a look at Xbox 360 games over the last 6 years, right? Is that how long it's been out? 6 years, I think. You don't see a drastic improvement in the quality of these games because there's no additional processing overhead available to take advantage of. You're not going to see developers try to think of new and unique things if our medium processing capability is at X level X, as opposed to in the GPU world. The reason we have seen graphics engines increase and the reason we've seen like Unreal be able to come out with Unreal Engine 4 and just totally push the boundaries, because they have complete confidence in the capability of NVIDIA and ATI/AMD to create new GPUs that will be able to meet those needs. Software developers aren't pushing it on the CPU side anymore, not because they can't, but because there's no innovation at that level yet. But once that innovation comes back, is there any room for them to grow? Right? If we're stuck on ARM level performance, it's good enough for email and it's good enough for browsing the web and doing basic stuff. But
that's 90% of the market right there.
It is today, but what about in 5 years? Is that going to be 90% of the market in 5 years? I don't know, and I hope it's not, because I hope things are changing. I hope there's different stuff happening, and I believe that there's more processing power necessary for that in the long run. And I think Intel has the engineering resources to keep going forward and pushing forward. I just don't think they'll have the business motivation to do so on their own without Athlon 64, right? Without the first integrated memory controller, without the first integration of 64-bit technology and that kind of stuff, right? So I'm worried that
I honestly think AMD is coming at them sideways. And maybe I'm being a little too optimistic about this. And yeah, it's with the APU, because if you look at the work that AMD is doing with OpenCL, they've got their whole Fusion Developer Conference coming up in a couple of weeks. You look at the low-level things that they're implementing in their APUs that will allow them to more seamlessly work together. Now, Intel has that part where they share the last level cache, but the last level cache is only like 8 megs in size. And when you consider that a lot of the work that APUs or the potential OpenCL or any of these products will use, they're going to be well past that. And so Intel is somewhat constrained by how it handles memory and communication with the GPU part, and that's one thing that I think that AMD is actually a little bit more forward-looking. Their solution at base level looks less complex. I mean, they've got this kind of memory crossbar that's attached to the CPU and GPU, and it shares resources from the memory controller. But if you look at how many gigabytes per second that thing runs at, it's actually pretty impressive. And the amount of data that can be transferred through there is huge, and I think it dwarfs that of what Intel is able to do with its what kind of bus does that have? It's a ring bus, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so when you think, I think someone from AMD said, hey, look at it this way, a single frame of, I think it was a 1080p or an HD movie frame is about 6.4 megs in size. And so if you're sharing information for this decoding and whatnot, I mean, that stuff won't even, it'll barely even fit in the last level cache. And if it does so, then it evicts everything else that the CPU may need or the GPU part of it may need. And so it's not a great option for developers. Now, I'm not trying to, blow sunshine up everybody's rear ends, but I think that AMD is taking a much broader view of future computing, and they have a great ally in this in NVIDIA. Even though those two are great competitors, their only hope at existence is to work together in some way and make sure that Intel does not, render both of them obsolete. And I think that they can do that. They've got a lot of software guys behind them. NVIDIA had their GPU conference just, a couple weeks ago. AMD's got theirs coming up, and I mean they're working with universities, they're working with a lot of students, they're working with the faculties and other people throughout the industry that see the potential of using the GPU as this massively parallel processor that could have potentially a huge impact in our daily lives in how we navigate the internet, how we access data, how we simply stream stinking massive movies onto our watches if that's what we want to do. These things will be very, very important to us. So I don't know if you guys agree or disagree with that, but I think that's a potential opportunity, and the only way that AMD has any leverage whatsoever against Intel.
You are correct, and I think that's obviously what they're betting on. Right. I don't know how 100% I am trusting in that, because I think what will happen is what I think could happen is that Intel holds off on, kind of holds that industry back, that whole heterogeneous systems architecture idea back long enough until their processor is capable of doing that itself. Kind of like
64-bit computing.
Yeah, no, exactly like that, right? So AMD had it first, and Windows existed in 64-bit status for that, but it wasn't really pushed until Intel supported it, because who wants to push an operating system to a maximum of 15% of your market or 20% of your market, right? So I want AMD's push for the APU and HSA to be successful, because I think that is the way we're going to go, and AMD wants to get there first because they need to make that money, get that money and market share before Intel kind of sneaks in and takes it out from under them. So we will see very soon. Hey, I don't know if you guys heard this, but there was a rumor going around. I'm saying that at the beginning of the story as we discussed it. Rumor that NVIDIA was going to recall their GTX 600 series Kepler GPU. So you guys heard this?
Once or twice.
All three of the ones they sold?
Well, hopefully it's more than that. So there was some website that posted a rumor that NVIDIA was going to recall the Kepler GTX 600 series GPUs. Tim posted a story about it, said that it sounds like it was highly unlikely that they would do that. The reasoning that they gave was because chips would suffer from performance degradation after prolonged periods of heavy usage. And it right away sounded pretty weird, right? Because I think, Josh, you even said that it's more than likely that it would stop working altogether, not that it would somehow kind of degrade in performance, right?
Yeah, not like the what was it, the Intel Z68 chipset, whose SATA 2 performance would slowly just grind to a halt.
Actually, that didn't slow down. That just slowly became more to not recognize the drive. Right? No. And that was on the SATA 3, or wasn't it?
No, that was on the SATA 2. Right. Yeah.
Yep.
And so, I mean, with the chip this complex, if it has multiple failures throughout there, that's going to potentially slow performance. It's just going to stop before it really ever kind of shows any kind of slower performance. The only thing that I could think of is maybe some vias were dislodged, and because of the way the designs were, they have multiple points of contact. So if one or two were dislodged over time, you might see a lower overall, boost clock or base megahertz performance. But it's not this. It's running at 1056, but my frames just get slower and slower and slower over time. More than likely, it's just going to stop working altogether rather than just slow down. So I think this was kind of a strange rumor to have come out in the first place. But fun to comment on.
NVIDIA PR says there is no truth to this rumor, and we posted an update later in the day saying that apparently if our thoughts weren't very clear in the news post, that we thought it was completely incorrect, that the recall reference in the story below is almost assuredly complete and under BS. And I don't want to say the whole curse word because young people might read our front page.
Bull caca.
Indeed. Yes. So don't worry about recalling your 600 series card if you bought one. What else we got here? Thunderbolt has been released from Thunderbolt capable motherboards from both Asus and MSI were announced this week. And actually I have both of them here now. I have this MSI GD80 motherboard.
Shiny.
And I have this Asus P8Z77V Premium motherboard. Both of which have Thunderbolt ports on them for the first time. And then over here, I won't get the device over because it's kind of heavy, but we do have our first Thunderbolt accessory here.
That was only like $75 cable, right?
It couldn't have been for Monster Cable then.
Signed by Apple in California, so it's at least $75. At least $75. And we've got the Pegasus R4 Thunderbolt kind of 4-drive RAID device over here for testing on it soon as well. So that's interesting. Thunderbolt connectivity finally coming to the Windows PC, courtesy of at least a couple of motherboards for now. I think the only one that's officially supported or has been, verified by the Thunderbolt consortium or whatever it is the Asus board. I think the MSI one is maybe just right behind it. But I think tomorrow we're going to plug these motherboards in, and hopefully our array will have, what do we call it, Alan? Initialize itself finally.
Yeah, it should do it even with the cord disconnected, though, right?
Yeah. No, I've just got it plugged in, so it's doing all that stuff. But it is a 1 terabyte RAID 5 array that it's working on. Yeah,
so the MSI motherboard standing behind the Asus one saying "soon."
Hopefully. And you'll see in that news post that we made of the Thunderbolt for Windows Performance preview, we actually had a video that we recorded with JJ. Remember, we did all of our Z77 videos with JJ. We did our overview. We did all of the individual features. Well, we actually got to sit down and talk about and demonstrate Thunderbolt performance and features that day at the office. But we obviously couldn't show it to you guys, discuss it, both because the motherboard itself was under NDA. The Thunderbolt chipset controller and all that kind of stuff was under a separate NDA than the Z77 chipset. So you can go check out that video now. It's about 8 minutes long. Kind of gives you a bit of a review of what Thunderbolt connectivity is, how it benefits over USB 3.0, some of the performance benefits you can expect with Thunderbolt. It's actually, if I do say so myself, it's a pretty well put together video, guys. Pretty good.
So is your wife watching Netflix right now?
I don't think so.
She's streaming. Is she downloading Prawn? And I'm not talking shrimp.
Yeah, that's me on this screen over here.
Okay, well, never mind then.
Ryan.
Did I get jumpy?
You got the max headroom action going on.
I practice it. That's actually all just generated by me. That's computer.
The irony is that it just happened.
Yes.
Damn.
You were giving us the bedroom eyes.
Yep.
Yeah, actually, I can see it on my end now, too. Well, let's talk about Josh's banana. Somebody else besides my connection itself. Josh,
what? Banana phone?
Yeah,
I have a banana phone?
Yeah.
VIA has announced the $49 Android PC. I don't know anything about it other than somebody said Josh's banana. It's called the Banana and banana phone, but it's certainly not my anyway. What can you tell us about this, Jeremy? Anything?
Well, it's a lot of people are taking this as an attack against the Raspberry Pi, and it really doesn't seem to be, because it does not have the ability to plug into Shields that the Raspberry Pi can do. There's a lot that the Pi can do that this can't. On the other hand, this is the basis of an absolutely brilliant HTPC. You've got HDMI out, you've got USB out, you've got networks out. It's got an ARM 11 system on a chip, 512 megs of DDR3, 2 gigs of flash memory embedded, and is quite happy to boot off of extra memory through the USB ports. But on the other hand, it's not quite as powerful as the Pi that we've been seeing. It's probably going to be only able to do 720p, not 1080p that we've been able to see the Raspberry Pi do. So this seems more like something that's going to be sold inside of a very pretty box for somebody that doesn't want to play with it. The Raspberry Pi is sold, as is, build your own enclosure, have fun, let's see what you can do. This, I think, is going to be VIA trying to, grab a little piece of the HTPC market, and at 13.5 watts maximum power consumption when it's going full out on 720 video, not too bad. It's probably going to be beautifully inexpensive. You're not going to be paying for, the better part of $1,000, $1,500 for a custom design HTPC with half-kite cards or less. Some interesting ways of ducting heat out to keep it totally passive cooling. But for this, I think what you're going to see is an HTPC system which is roughly the size of a banana, let alone a bread box, and is just going to be pretty much plug and play, and it'll work. I don't know how well VIA is going to do marketing it. They've never had the best luck at trying to market some of their pre-built systems in the past, except to the enterprise, who still use the C9s and some of the older chips. But it's an interesting little piece of equipment, and hopefully we'll be seeing a product based around it soon, but I would very much suggest that you're going to see this sold as a complete package, as opposed to hopefully waiting for your Raspberry Pi open board to arrive in the mail some point when they get stock again.
Someday.
Yeah.
Alrighty, Alan, you want to talk to us a little bit about Seagate pursuing the purchase of LaCie and what this might mean for kind of high-end prosumer storage devices?
Right. Well, it's not finalized yet. Keep in mind. So
Sure.
There's a whole lot of hoopla going around about, hey, this is probably going to happen, but don't bet on it until it's a done deal. But it looks like it's definitely going that way. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Seagate wants LaCie to be part of their
Empire.
Their empire, yeah, whatever you want to call it, right? This might actually be pretty good for them because LaCie. I'm not sure. I haven't reviewed a whole bunch of LaCie stuff, but I think they don't necessarily only go with Seagate, right? Whereas imagine all of the LaCie items being sold all having Seagate drives in them, right? Which is probably what would end up happening here.
Definitely.
They wouldn't necessarily share technology, like you wouldn't see Seagate branded LaCie style cases, like external enclosures necessarily, right? They probably still keep the LaCie brand and all that stuff going on. Most likely they would just remain mostly two separate entities, but at the same time, LaCie would just buy their hard drives from Seagate, right? Sort of makes sense. Similar to actually the Western Digital Hitachi thing from from a little while back.
Right.
Yep.
You know what I'm talking about? You guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah. They're I think they're under some sort of 2-year agreement thing where they're not even allowed to share stuff. So they can buy stuff from one another, but they can't share stuff. So this will probably end up being something similar.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think this gives Seagate an automatic presence in kind of the high end prosumer storage market, which is what LaCie is kind of known for, right? They're not really a budget consumer product brand, I don't think.
Right.
They're not like a Thermaltake USB 3.0 hard drive dock that you plug your own stinking hard drive in. It's a fully featured entire product.
Yep. And it is Seagate and Hitachi that are both, they really tend to push things on the terms of capacity points, right? So for example, Seagate right now makes a 4 terabyte drive. Just putting it out there. So LaCie probably wants that sort of stuff, in their enclosures because it's the highest end, right? It's the Apple of external storage, I guess, if you want to call them that. It's probably a fair
it's got
assessment.
A big blue glowy bulb on the front of their things.
Yeah, I mean they're very pricey. The hardware it's very nice hardware. There's really they don't seem to cut any corners at all. But you do pay a lot, right? LaCie years back, I think they got their name out there because they had an external hard drive enclosure, all aluminum, polished aluminum, and it was designed by Porsche, right? You remember that thing? This was like 10, 15 years ago. This was a long time ago, but they had, it was like, what, Porsche? But it was a really pretty looking external enclosure.
Now all the cool kids use BMW.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Who designs
thermal
what? Who designs what thermal tape?
Exactly.
The level
BMW,
10
exactly.
BMW design.
Yes, BMW.
And that
All the
Malibu
good
Das
stuff.
ist BMW,
comes from
ja.
car stuff.
Das ist gut. Das ist sehr gut. Jawohl.
Jeremy, you want to tell us, give us a quick overview of the discrete graphics card market according to John Petty research that you made a news post about today?
I could, although it's very debatable that it's now the discrete GPU market because unless he's specifically talking about add-in boards, any CPU Intel or AMD is selling right now counts as a video card, which is also probably why AMD managed to at least hold their ground, a 0.3% growth compared to previous quarter. Not so bad. On the other hand, you've got Intel that saw a bit of a fall, and NVIDIA that really did kind of see a lot of pain, in and about where 4.5%. But part of that, again, is because really the graphics card market is really changing. So NVIDIA finally dropped out the IGP sales that they've still been having in Asia. Believe it or not, NVIDIA IGPs are still selling in Asia. They're not going to count them anymore, but it was, a good 3 or 4% of their market share. But overall, if you look specifically at sales for only discrete cards, sales are up from 2.7% from previous quarter, down from 11% this time last year. On the other hand, you also have to factor into that the fact that a lot of the sales that are done are not enthusiasts buying a specific video card. It is the boutique computers straight through to the bargain basement computer stores buying components so they can build a pre-configured system. And since there was this great shortage of hard drives for a very long time, straight across the board, sales dropped down. So what we've been seeing, which is sort of the herald of the end of the discrete graphics card, we've now see it on the CPU that you buy. If you're just looking for, as we were talking about with AMD, just good enough computing, you only need to worry about a couple of Facebook games, email. There's no reason for you to have to buy a discrete video card anymore, because if you want to play HD video, guess what? The HD 4000 or a Trinity or a Llano's GPU is going to handle that just fine. Whereas before, it would be noticeably choppy. So it's a very interesting market right now in that it's sort of almost hard to define exactly what a graphics card is now. But
yeah,
I can define it.
Yeah.
Well, I think what this basically is just the death knell of the sub $100 graphics card. You throw a CPU in there, it's going to do the same exact thing, except it's going to do it without the added memory. It's going to do it without the added PCB and the cooling and everything. That's all going to be on the CPU. But when we start looking at die size of these products, the Trinity is about 240 millimeters square. Ivy Bridge, I think, I can't remember, is 160 millimeters square. These sub $100 GPUs from AMD and NVIDIA were, in the realm of 120 millimeters square up to about 200, depending on how many, options they disabled on that particular card. But what we're seeing is now the death of that low margin, high volume part. And now we're seeing, lower volumes, but they're all going to be much, much higher margin. And we're going to see a much larger increase in overall performance because of memory density, memory bus performance and bandwidth, and the overall size of the GPU is going to be just larger. And I think that this is still a growing market considering where games are, how PC gaming is still very, very viable. Workstation type stuff. I mean, an integrated GPU is not going to do everything. It's not going to do everything somebody wants to do. And so even though we're not going to see volumes increase, I think we're going to see overall margins increase because the difference in quality and performance of going with $100 or $130 GPU versus what you get for free and integrated is going to sway a lot of people to go that way. So in some aspects, this is kind of a godsend to not just NVIDIA and AMD and their partners, but to users as well. I mean, we get the basic good enough graphics to do some interesting things on, but you want to go further than that, then you're going to pay a little bit more. You're going to fatten up these AMD and NVIDIA guys' margins. And so it's not a negative thing that we're seeing IGPs that are as good as they are, because they're never going to approach the kind of power we see from a standalone GPU once we start getting above 120, 160 millimeters squared.
And there's entire form factors now that you pretty much have to depend on either an incredibly low-powered add-in card or just depend on the GPU power of the CPU, because Sleekbooks and Ultrabooks do not lend themselves to graphics cards very much.
No, those 17-watt TDP parts are even Intel and AMD. I mean, they're going to be hard to work on in terms of 3D graphics. It's just not enough beef.
Agreed. Whoa, easy now. Yeah. Let's get into our hardware software picks of the week. I'm going to go first and recommend this sexy device I just got in. I was trying to turn it off so I could actually lift it up here and show it on camera, but I can't figure out how to hit the power button from where I'm at. This is the Pegasus R4 Thunderbolt external storage device. The link I actually put through here in the show notes actually goes to the Apple Store, where this device sells for almost $1,200, apparently.
$1,200
with 1 terabyte, 7,200 RPM hard drives in there.
That's a Drobo Pro price.
Yeah,
that's
but it
no
doesn't
Drobo
have,
Pro.
This one has
but it's not
2 Thunderbolt ports.
I mean, Thunderbolt.
Alan, do you have some SSDs you can send me so I can test them with SSDs instead?
I don't have 4 of like the same of anything.
Whatever.
Do they have to be the same?
Alan.
Can they be close?
You got like 16 of everything.
Yeah, do like SandForce ones or something like that.
All right, we'll talk about that. So yeah, that's so what we talked about, the Thunderbolt ready motherboards. We're gonna test compatibility and at least initial performance with this Pegasus device behind us, and just kind of see what the Thunderbolt experience is like. I'm hoping it's just as simple as USB 3, where I plug it in and stuff just works. But there are reports that may not be the case yet. So we'll see how that works out.
Hey, Alan, because you are such good friends with the Drobo people, have they any plans on Thunderbolt?
I have heard nothing.
Therefore, you are
actually
nothing.
My buddy with Drobo no longer works at Drobo.
Oh,
so you got a messy divorce on your hands.
Messy divorce, yeah.
So to speak. All right, who's next, Jeremy?
Well, I had a hard time this week picking anything, but I decided one of the things that I should go with is the best use of a Kickstarter program ever, which was to build a DeLorean hovercraft. There is probably nothing cooler on the planet right now than a working DeLorean hovercraft.
I like the levitating bed option as well.
That was my other choice, is, if floating metal doesn't get you up, how about a levitating bed for under $1,000? Yeah, and most of it's going to be neodymium magnets, but on the other hand,
huge ducted fan in the back of that thing.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
You could also have a levitating bed. Who would not want a levitating bed? It's only going to hold about 250 pounds. Maybe you can fit, more magnets under a double bed so that 250 pounds is, and certain kinetic motion is not an issue. But hey, come on, floating bed, go for it.
Floating bed.
I saw that this morning too. I thought that was pretty sweet. Although it looked like a pain in the ass when like the magnets accidentally got stuck together.
Just don't have anything you like in between those magnets because you're not getting it back.
Like a finger.
So that would be awesome. So that would be just awesome for something like
other
a
parts.
bed.
Yeah, any parts.
Yeah, bad.
Oh.
It'll be oatmeal.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hey, don't do that. Don't do
Nice.
that.
I think I sent that link on another episode.
Josh, what do you got for us?
Me.
You.
You know, back in the Ice Age, the land of dinosaurs of 3D graphics, I played this game called Thief. And it was really good. It was a lot of fun. You could sneak around. You could garrote people. Well, not garrote, but, blackjack or, hit them with your arrow, and people would yell thief and all these, scriptural type things. And it was a wonderful experience. Well, you can live it again. They now have the entire Thief collection on Steam. That includes the original Thief Gold, the Metal Age or Iron Age? I can't remember. The Metal Age. And then the Thief Deadly Shadows, all for $13.49. You could
Plus tax were applicable.
shoot as many moss arrows and water arrows as your heart desires and enjoy every single second of sneaking around in the shadows. $13.49. Relive your youth, of which I still count being 25 part of my youth.
Yeah. I'm with you on that.
Man, you guys are old.
Shut it.
Alan, what do you got?
All right, so Paragon Hard Disk Manager, which is one of those programs you can use to image your C drive or whatever drive to whatever other drive or that sort of thing. Like, if you're
that's a really
upgrading
great
to
description.
it does a whole bunch of stuff, right? It does backups. It does.
Why does your link take me to the My Account page at Paragon?
I just get this page has insecure content.
Wrong link. Okay.
Man.
Anyway,
trying to give us viruses, guys.
I will get the correct link into the show notes. Anyhow, man, you stole my mojo now. No. All right. So during all these imaging operations, when say you're migrating from your old partition to a new drive, many people do this when they move from their old hard drive in a laptop per se to their solid state drive that they just got, and they don't feel like doing a reinstall or anything like that.
I'm totally with it.
A lot of this imaging software does not take into account partition alignment properly. So if you've done a clean install with Windows Vista or Windows 7 and you made the partitions with that installer, the partitions should be aligned correctly. It actually aligns them to like a 1 megabyte boundary. So with SSDs, you're worried about being on a 4 kilobyte boundary, and new Windows just takes it to the next level. They're just like, yes, it's definitely on a 4K boundary because 4K is a multiple underneath, or divides into 1 megabyte evenly. So they're covered there. The problem is that if you do something like migrating that partition to another drive and you throw in like a resize operation in there, and I've actually seen this in person happen, like I was migrating, or I just did a little field test with 1 terabyte Velociraptor, and I was like, all right, let me just image my internal SSD over to the Velociraptor and see how my OS runs then compared to an SSD that I was running on. Well, I did that, and I let the program I was using do the resize, which was actually a Cronus, slightly older version of a Cronus. And I didn't realize this until I then imaged it back to the solid state drives, and they started crawling like in short order because I resized the partitions during the move. Well, you know how Windows has that short 100 megabyte partition at the beginning, that little recovery one, right? Well, it resized that, and that ended up scooting over by an uneven multiple of, 4K. So my C drive, which was after that, was offset. And then once you run an SSD offset like that for long enough, it just really does a number on it, slows it down a lot. So Paragon Hard Disk Manager, starting with version 12, it has that intelligence built in. So if you're doing moves and resizes and stuff that has to do with moving partitions around, it pays attention to that, and it makes sure that when it does scoot it over or resize it, that the end or the beginning of that partition is on the right kind of a boundary so that you don't end up with this kind of a situation. So very handy, and something that I'm glad that they're paying attention to, because it didn't seem like anybody else was paying attention to it in the industry yet. So everybody else...
I think I got lucky. Because I used the Western Digital free Acronis, which was updated not all that long ago, to go from that 120 gig first generation Samsung drive to 240 gig Agility 3. But in so doing, I increased the space from the reserved from 25 megs, which was way too small to install SP1, back to its necessary 100 megs.
Yep.
So yeah, I thought that things would be possibly screwed around, but luckily I seem to have gotten past it, because this damn thing is much faster than that first generation Samsung drive as it is.
Well, there's a 1 in 8 chance that you'll be okay.
Well, I hit the frickin' lottery.
There you go, Josh. Your one lucky break of your life.
Well, that's about it. I mean, look at the world
and you're done.
You'll understand there are no lucky breaks.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to end the podcast for us for this week. If you want to get in touch with us, send us an email, podcast@pcper.com. I think we still have a telephone number, 1-888-38-PCPer. I tell Jeremy to check it all the time, but I don't think he ever checks it, so you can blame him. pcper.com/podcast is the URL to use to share the show with other people. Spread it amongst your friends, like a cough or a cold, or a different disease, I guess, if you are so inclined.
Alopecia. I heard that's spreading.
Twitter.com, Facebook.com, YouTube.com, gplus.to, all of those /PCPer hook you up with ways to keep up with our news and reviews. Also, of course, you can go to PCPer.com each and every day, multiple times a day, and click on every link possible. And that would be great, too. So thank you guys. Thank you guys for allowing us to push back the recording time a little bit for tonight. Thank you, Burke, as well, running the boards for us. We will see you next week on the PC Perspective Podcast. I'm Ryan Schroep.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm still Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
Thanks for listening.